format of the session for this evening, you all know the agenda is I will request Ravi Purushottam, President MMA, to deliver the formal welcome address. Can you mute, please?
Thank you, Group Captain. It's indeed my privilege.
One second, Ravi. I'm trying to mute a couple of people. Wait. I'll take another 2-3 minutes. Can you mute Ganeshan, please? His voice is audible here. Ganeshan, can you mute yourself, please? Sorry. Before I call upon Ravi to deliver the formal welcome address, let me briefly tell you, because give some more allowance to some other people who are lining up there at the gate, couple of them, and I know I don't want them to miss the opening remarks. Let me briefly tell you what's happening. Tomorrow we have again an outstanding speaker under the MMA Ponds Veteran Leader Speak series, Professor Rajiv Batra. Rajiv Batra is a professor of marketing, Ross School of Business, University of Michigan, and he is a thought leader, one of the outstanding professors in the field of marketing. He's going to be talking to something very, very important: creating brand coolness and brand love, how to make your brand stronger. And we also got some outstanding people who will be interacting with him from HUL and a couple of other leading FMCG brand leaders from around the world. Then we also have a couple of very good events. We have a telecom man, Single is going to talk on 4th. Then we have Sridhar, I'm Not Creative. But I want to tell you something important, 2-3 more events which you must note down. And you can log into almost same ID you all know, which is there to log in. It's also live on Facebook and YouTube of MMA. Mr. Kannan, business mentor, former MD of Adidas, Singapore. He's going to be talking to on the 8th of Saturday. And his subject is again very cool subject: consumer centricity and the value in and skincare to sportswear to smartphone and now to social sector. He's going to be talking on the 8th. Then on the 10th, we have again an outstanding speaker, Arun Mehra, you all know, and he was a former member of the Planning Commission, former global head of Boston Consulting Group, and he's going to be talking to us on COVID, the new normal in governance. He's going to be talking on the 10th evening at 6 o'clock. Then we have a exclusive event for Women Convention, some outstanding speakers again talking there. And then we have event on the 17th, which not to be missed event. And I urge upon you, please mark your diary. And post-pandemic world and India, Mr. Gurumurthy, chartered accountant, columnist, political economist, analyst. He's going to be talking to us. Mr. Gurumurthy is also part of the RBI. He'll be talking to us. Then we have Atul Vora. He'll be talking to us from USA Taxes on purposeful leadership. He's again under Ponds Leadership series. And we also have the current DGP of Chennai, DGP, Director General of Police, CBCID. He's going to be talking discussion on the theme, Philippism and 333 Maxim. He's going to be talking something, what's happening, reforms in the police sector, and much more. We have a number of other events. I think it's already put on our website because I don't want to eat up into today's event. I think we're already reaching up. I'm waiting for the number to reach 50. I think by the time I finish, the Jude comes in, it should be 100 because people are there at the gate. I know my people are telling. Now, let me have the privilege of introducing our distinguished President MMA to deliver the formal welcome address. Ravi, just to tell you briefly about Ravi is the President of Danfoss Industries, 100% subsidiary of the leading family-owned Danish MNC Danfoss, and headquarters in Denmark. And since 2013, he's a part of the Danfoss. He's an active member of a number of industry bodies, chairman of CIA 2014-15, chairman of CIA Tamil Nadu 17-18, and is also currently chair of the CIA Food and Agriculture. He's currently the president of MMA. Ravi, may I request you to please deliver a formal welcome address and also welcome our distinguished chief guest for this evening, and Ramesh.
Yeah, thank you, Group Captain. It's indeed my privilege to deliver the formal welcome address on this unique online conversation on a very interesting theme, which is governance, second in the series of live talks that has been scheduled under a brand value management series organized by MMA and Equitar Value Advisory with the support of CAS Germany. I consider it as an honor to welcome this evening Mr. Sailesh Haribhakti, Chartered Accountant, Board and Audit Committee Chair, Independent Director and Evangelist on Economy, ESG, IR, Tech Audit Committee Chair and Independent Director. Mr. Ramesh Jude Thomas is the President and CKO of Equitar Value Advisory. I take this opportunity to welcome also the members of MMA who have joined us live on Zoom, YouTube, and multiple platforms in large numbers from all over the country. I think we in MMA need to really thank Group Captain and his team, who have been like formidable warriors during the COVID. They've really kind of pivoted the whole MMA's operations to move completely to digital in about 7-8 days. And I think over the last 100 days, we have been kind of doing a number of programs online. I think for some of you who are probably first time on the panel on this platform today evening, MMA is the largest management association in the country and has been awarded the best management association for almost 10 years continuously due to the phenomenal work that has been done by Group Captain and his team, and also several past presidents who have been pivotal to this whole transformation, propagating management movement across the corporate members, students, and public at large. As my mentor says, Dr. C.K. Prahlad, that the fortune lies in the bottom of the pyramid, and I think MMA is one of those management institutions who have really embodied that and really taken management to really the nook and corner of Tamil Nadu. Today's discussion, of course, on a very interesting theme, which is governance as an imperative of brand management, can never be overemphasized. Strong brand presence in the market differentiates a company from its competitors and creates brand affinity for a company's products or services. The most important point that I think is to be noted is brand is associated more with the business entity, though some of its products or services may enjoy a brand loyalty from customers. In that sense, I believe that brand management strategy of an entity must take into account a number of overarching elements that define the brand strategy of the company. In that list, probably among the various influencers that we can think of in defining the brand image of the company, I personally believe governance would figure on the top. I also believe it is the underlying factor, in my view, that in commencing the series of talks on brand value management, with governance as one of the important themes that is being discussed today. While reams have been written on the subject of corporate governance, the essence of good governance lies could be most encapsulated in the concept of an enforced structure that works for the benefit of all the stakeholders, even while the enterprise adheres to the highest ethical standards and best practices, in my view, which are, of course, stipulated within the laws of the operating models. Compliance is the key to good governance, and I'm sure all policies, procedures should be transparently disclosed to the relevant stakeholders by communicating pertinent information to employees, investors, suppliers, government, and all the members of the community around. In any business ecosystem, also within our own country, we have seen numerous examples which continue to demonstrate and it resonates in good governance that we have seen over decades. And of course, if you look at these companies or these enterprises, I think they have all demonstrated without compromising the value system. On the other hand, we have also witnessed some glaring examples of organizations which blatantly have been violating principles of good governance with loosely structured monitoring systems, I would call it, or probably there are ambiguous policies, casual compliance priorities, probably starting from leadership, in my view. In any crisis, of course, to be fair, the brand equity of such organizations takes the biggest hit, leading to value destruction of almost all the stakeholders. It is so obvious that what prevents organizations from seeing the writing on the wall? I mean, what drives organizations to compromise on governance and compliances? Where does the solution really lie? We look forward to an insightful conversation this evening from our distinguished chief guest, who has enormous experience in strategic brand management and also advising global organizations on governance practices. We also look forward to hearing views from Mr. Ramesh Jude Thomas, who's also worked quite extensively on on these areas on brand value management. I would also like to take this opportunity to welcome all the past presidents of MMA, invitees from Equator, my colleagues from the managing committee, members of MMA, the distinguished invitees who are attending today, students from the different management schools, and viewers across all over the globe who are live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and I can't remember what all more platforms are there, but I think MMA also live webcasts and audio live webcasts through MMA Radio and Voice of MMA. Wish you all a very exciting evening, and I would hand it back to Group Captain.
Thank you, Ravi. Thank you so much. Ramesh Jude Thomas, RJT, to his friends and colleagues, is credited with introducing brand valuation as a strategic business tool in the Indian industry. When I met Ramesh for the first time, you get so much attracted to his professional acumen, and that is what drawn out of that acumen, and that relationship is what we're all enjoying the brand value management series today. And our Equator is our knowledge partner. Is a boutique management consulting firm who are pioneer in the area of brand value management. Their work is based on the philosophy that brands are the primary business assets that need to drive the value creation agenda. And over the last 18 years, they have worked on more than 100 brands across 21 sectors, varying sizes, countries, and life stages. We are indeed privileged to join them as they joined us as a knowledge partner to bring a series of brand event, which is going to be there next, carrying on for next 10 months. With that, I would like to invite Ramesh Jude Thomas, the President and CQO of Equator, to introduce our distinguished chief guest for this evening, Mr. Shailesh Haribhakti, and also the theme of this evening discussion. Over to you, Ramesh.
Thank you, Group Captain, and thank you, Mr. Venkatraman. I'm delighted to be here again in the second episode of this 8-part series on brand value management in partnership with MMA. And thank you again to MMA as well. In the inaugural session, we had our guest, Mr. Suresh Narayanan, the chairman of Nestle India. Those of you who had attended that session would recall how vividly he established the role of their brands in creating and indeed protecting shareholder value in several crises, not excluding the one that we are going through right now. What was in no doubt at the end of that session was that brands cannot be treated as expense list items. They are trademarks which are ring-fenced properties of the firm, no doubt. But more than that, a simple test of absence will establish the extent of performance impairment that they would face without access to these assets. Imagine if Google could not use their name for the next 1 year. From tomorrow. So these are clearly long-term assets, but not recognized in the books, unfortunately. The question before us today, and that's what I want to talk about, is how significant is this omission really? And very quickly set a little context before we go to our chief guest for today. Think about this. On the average, you pay 4 to 5 times book value to buy a firm or a share, in fact. So if the books only represent 20 to 25% of the cost of buying the firm, then what are the investors really paying the balance 75 to 80% for? This is largely brands and intellectual property. And as we call it at Equator, these are the reputation and the recipe of the firm. These are proprietary, and these actually create value, they drive value. The question that we have wrestled with and indeed argued about for a decade and a half is this. If indeed these assets, the recipe and reputation of a firm, are so obviously material to the future and therefore the forecast of a firm, they're not recognized by compliance. Why are they not accountable for creating value? Why not? They are not at the forefront of the value creation agenda for our shareholders. Why is there no ratio today like return on total assets, where the denominator consists of the intangibles as well? Why is there no mandated brand governance, as it were? If these are critical weapons of shareholder value, then these questions need to be addressed. As a part of this MMA initiative, we thought it might be relevant to address these questions right at the beginning of the series rather than at the end, because we must establish the need for recognition and governance, as Mr. Venkatramani had mentioned a little before we talk about the brand as a central organizing principle of any business. And to explore this thought, we thought we would invite someone with unparalleled expertise and experience in this area at the intersection of three crucial areas to this theme. Let me tell you a little bit about our guest for today. Mr. Sailesh Haribhakti was born to be a chartered accountant. After a top-ranking performance at school, and just listen to this, including the accolade of National Scholar, All India topper at ISC, ranker in college at ICAI and ICWAI, he completed his academic journey by the time he was 22. He was done with it. He then went to Chicago for a stint with Ernst & Young, and then returned to India as an academic to teach at IIM Ahmedabad. By the ripe old age of 25, Sailesh Bhai was appointed to the board of GIC AMC. Think about that. Over the next 3 decades, he also took his accounting firm to the 6th position in India. Over this period, every financial institution and every major business house in the West had got a taste of his unique professional style and his skills. But in the meantime, the demand for his contribution to boards only grew and grew. Till date, he has been on over 100 boards, with several reappointments amongst them. The crowning glory was a stint at the SAC of the IASB in London and the chairmanship of NPS for 2 years. Currently, he chairs no less than 6 boards, including L&T Financial Holdings, Future Lifestyle, Blue Star Limited, Baker Tilly, the Institute of Directors, and the Western Region chapter of CII. He also sits on 12 other boards. Now, if you thought all of these would keep this gentleman occupied for 7 days a week, 20 hours a day, you just hold your breath. There's more. He has 2 books to his credit, The Digital Professional and The Audit Renaissance. I don't know how he finds time to do all this. And he passionately on these boards, evangelizes the idea of ESG, XTech, and integrated reporting. If that's not enough, through Gaja Capital, Intuit, Rotary, and the United Way, he has been involved with investing, digital board processes, and the fine art of giving, as he calls it. It is this unique combination of business processes, institution building, and charity work that sets him apart. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Mr. Sailesh Haribhakti. Now, our invitation did not just get an amazing response, but also a large number of interesting questions. So what we decided to do only yesterday was to convert this into a largely fireside chat about some of the things that were asked post opening remarks by Mr. Haribhakti. With me to quiz our honored guest is my colleague Siddharth Gautam. You can see him on the screen, who leads our valuation practice. An MBA in finance from Calcutta, Siddharth was a career banker before he jumped into Equitor in 2014. Under him, our reputation for rigor and defendability has grown every day. Finally, he took the initiative to get us certified by the Austrian Standards Bureau as the first Indian firm to be certified for brand valuation and for brand audit practices. Now, without any further ado, I would like to invite our chief guest for his opening remarks before we fire questions at him. Mr. Haribhakti. You're on mute, sir. So you're on mute.
Thank you, Ramesh Bhai, as I fondly keep calling you. I must begin by thanking Group Captain Vijayji for bringing me back to MMA. MMA is an exceptional institution. And if anything exemplifies the contribution of brand and governance, it is an organization like MMA. And I'm particularly pleased to always see Ravi at all of these events as the leader, leading from the front. I think this is such a critical element of the way organizations should be managed. The leader should be upfront, and that is what Ravi is always there. Every time I've heard him, he has made exceptional impact and lasting impact on me. So I can say that MMA is in amazingly good hands. What can I say about Equitor? the kind of preparation that they have made for this event is absolutely exemplary. I've had already 2 interactions with their top team. And that is why I've fondly begun calling Rameshji Ramesh Bhai. And I think the depth, the intensity, and the commitment with which these things are planned are really the big lessons of governance. It is these qualities that we need across the board in every activity, every organization. You need to bring that kind of commitment, that kind of innovation, that kind of attention to detail in order to make something worthwhile for the people who have given their time. And so, Equitor, hats off to the way you have prepared. May all your sessions be phenomenal in terms of creating value for the people who come and listen to you.
Thank you, sir.
I will just say 3 things about governance and its link to brand and reputation. The first and foremost is the fact that today we are not responsible to a single stakeholder. We are not responsible only to the shareholders of the company. Just this week, we had an interaction with 2 gentlemen who own an exceptionally large business. And one of them mentioned very poignantly and very significantly that the key people whose stake is vibrant and is very important to protect is the employees of the organization. And it really struck me that the pivotal role that employees play in even a shareholder dominated by 2 brothers can play is something exceptional. Then you start thinking about all the other stakeholders in an enterprise. And you can think of the customers, you can think of the distributors who get the message of the organization to the final consumer. You think about the suppliers, you think about the government, the regulators, you think about the entire ecosystem. And if governance has to deliver high quality brand recall, it must make sure that the entire ecosystem comes to play together to enhance the value of all of these stakeholders. And therefore, we can no longer talk about only shareholder value enhancement. That term has been left behind. Today, the conversation has to be about the ecosystem stakeholder interest that needs to be enhanced at all times to be able to establish a brand that will be, as was pointed out in the next program that you're going to have, a loved brand. You cannot have a loved brand if the entire ecosystem's interest is not enhanced by all the work that is done by the entire team which is involved in the whole process of governance. And the one word that has emerged as critically important in this context is purpose. Just imagine what a binding force a well-defined purpose can have on bringing all the stakeholders to the game, bringing the entire ecosystem to feel that there is something afoot which is going to enhance value for everybody. That one word, that powerful force, is a defined purpose. It is what sets a fantastic organization with a great brand apart from everybody else.
Silas sir,
The second,
sorry to interrupt
yes,
you. Someone not muted. I will mute just a second, sir. Sorry to interrupt you.
sure.
Sorry for inconvenience. We are trying to locate somebody. We have muted centrally. One moment.
Silas sir, just switch on your mic, sir.
All right.
Okay. Go ahead.
Am I on now?
Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry,
Thank
sir.
you.
All right. Thank you. No, but it's very important that the communication should carry. I was talking about that. So the second thing I would like to share with you is I recall a board meeting that was being chaired by Mr. Mukesh Ambani, who has been so much in the news. He has raised more money than almost anybody, not almost anybody in the world. The largest amount of money that has been raised in the entire world this year has been by that one individual leading one group. And what did he have to say when asked the question, what is the most critical thing about governance that must happen? And he came up with just one word. And I can never forget, we were sitting in this large boardroom at Jamnagar, and he mentioned that the one word that is most important is sustainability. And I find that the entire fulcrum of our thinking and the entire pivot of our actions in the field of brand building and governance revolve around this one powerful word, sustainability. And why is that so? Because just as we have to enhance the value for the entire ecosystem, it is sustainability which brings the forces of environment, social responsibility, good governance, making sure that you are completely in tune with these elements, which are becoming the ticket to any investment. Today, it is almost impossible for any organization to attract international investment if they are not ESG and sustainability compliant. It's critical because an investment is made today, but the value from it is going to be released over the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. And if the organization is not sustainable from the environment, social responsibility, and governance viewpoint, how will you make that investment actually deliver value? And what will be the anchor that will make sure that this value is released over the period of investment? It will be the soft capital, the reputation, the brand, which will make sure that this sustainable organization will keep releasing that value. Final point I would like to make in just 3 things is that you have to look at your actions pretty much as our highest quality of spirituality asks you to do, which is that remain true to your action, remain true to your purpose, remain true to the fact that you need to deliver value over a period of time. But don't be completely dependent on the actual results that come out. Do your job, do it well. Make sure that you give your fullest commitment, your fullest self, and then let the results take care of themselves. If these 3 principles are kept in mind, then we would have outcomes which are far superior. And the 3 words, just so that you can remember them: purpose, sustainability, and selfless committed work. If these three principles are brought to bear on the entire functioning of any organization, for profit, not for profit, government, privately owned, owned by families, it doesn't matter what, you will see that the brand will emerge. And now let me focus for a few minutes, just 2 minutes, on what is happening to brands in the time of lockdown. What is it that will drive you to really go out and buy a product from wherever and by whatever means you can find it? And today, the explosion of e-commerce, the explosion of buying through the channel of the internet has gone through the roof. It's just incredible. The percentage growth that e-commerce has had in even traditionally completely physical retail driven products like pharmaceuticals, like drugs. It's unbelievable. What is now driving this? It is the brand. Which are the products which are selling the maximum today when you don't have the right kind of interactions that you used to have before? There's no outdoor advertising that you're exposed to. There's no film that you go to. There's no in-theater advertising that you're listening to. The largest cut has happened in sales and promotion expenses. And therefore, you don't see that many ads either in newspapers or in television. So what is it that automatically makes you order a product? It is the brand. It's the recall value of the brand. And when I used to perform brand valuations and I valued intangible assets and tangible assets and all sorts of claims which are there in the environment, one of the basic notions that I used to deploy is what is the incremental sales propensity that the brand, being a brand, actually delivers. And therefore, we would do all sorts of research to make sure, as Rameshji said, imagine that the word, or Ravi said, imagine the word Google is not used for 1 year. It's very hard to imagine that. But because the word used is Google, you will launch for any search to Google. Uber has virtually become a verb which describes the whole idea of shared mobility. Airbnb has come to exemplify what's the meaning of non-owned, limited time usage of any asset. And how would you value these how did the market place those phenomenal values on these kind of products and services? That value was placed because the brand made a promise. It delivered on that promise, not just because it was developed and there was a marketing force behind it, but because it delivered on that promise every time the brand was recalled and deployed and put to use. So to me, that is the big value. Again, this week we had the accounts approval of one of the pharma companies in the country, fairly large top 10 company. And it is astonishing that about 40% of that company's entire value is intangibles. 40% of the market cap. And that market cap itself is a multiple of the turnover of that company. So you can imagine the extent to which it becomes important to track this intangible value, to place it on a balance sheet, or at least to look at it as a board when you're looking at what is the composition of assets of a company. And when you think about it, you realize that to simply think of the financial capital of a company is no longer sufficient. It is important that you keep a tab on the physical capital, the financial capital, the reputation capital, very importantly, the environmental capital, the social capital, and the relationship capital. Now, unless you do this in an integrated manner, you're simply not doing justice to the three words, magic words, that define great governance and great brand building: purpose, sustainability, and selfless service. Thank you very much. We can have the round of question answers with that brief introduction. Ramesh Bhai, over to you.
Unmute, Mr. Ramesh. Unmute. Hey, Shankar, can you unmute, please? He has muted everybody because of background noise. Can you unmute co-host, please?
Yes. And Siddharth also, please.
And Siddharth Gautam also. Sorry, so slight noise was coming,
Yeah.
so he's muted everybody. Okay,
No issues.
go ahead, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Siddharth, over to you.
Thank you so much, Aditi. Thank you, sir. It's a privilege to be asking these questions to you. So I have put down a few questions that I thought would be relevant for this session. So let's start with the first one. As somebody who has been part of decision making at the highest level for this country's business decision makings, you are cognizant of the immense value that lies outside the books of accounts, the financial statements that are reviewed almost every board meeting. So when any company, any board is deliberating on the future of the firm, how do they take cognizance of the value which is outside, and how do therefore they plan the future around the value which is lying, the shareholder value which is lying outside the books?
Very good question. I think this is the nub of recognizing that there is a huge amount of reputational or brand capital that is embedded in every organization. Now, there are various ways in which this is brought to the attention of a board, let us say. So let's say we've done 3 acquisitions in the last 5 years. Then the difference between the actual value of assets minus liabilities that were taken over and the price that was paid is set up on the books as an intangible, right? Now, every year, the auditors and the board is supposed to test that intangible for any impairment. That is when the entire issue surrounding intangibles gets totally focused on. We have seen so many companies which had to suddenly write off huge quantums of money from their balance sheet because the brand which they thought they had paid for had lost its magic. It was not delivering the love that we talked about. It was not delivering that repeatability that it was meant to do. And when that happens, you need to impair that. And when that is actually done as an accounting entry, the general public doesn't know why this company went into a deep loss suddenly. But it's because this very large value that was paid, actually paid, suddenly disappeared. That is what happened when Nokia, for example, had to write off the value of its handset brand. It sold it to Microsoft. And Microsoft, in turn, had paid a value for the handset business. And they took a deep write-off when they had to account for the fact that that business was not the business they wanted to be, and they pivoted to cloud services. Great move. But in the year in which that happened, Microsoft took a huge write-off on the difference between the book value and the value at which the Nokia brand was set up. Now, this is going to start hitting us more and more during COVID times, because a lot of the erstwhile acquisitions that were made may have lost their reputation, and the pull of the brand is no longer what it used to be. And therefore, there will have to be a resizing. These are the two elements which are going to become the subject matter of debate, analysis, and public opinion creation over the next whole year. And you're going to see this repeatedly happening in corporate India, in the whole world. Because what has happened? The entire way people's minds are constructed has changed. It's no longer important for me to travel. I have discovered that I can spend 5 months without traveling and it doesn't hurt the way I live my life. I mean, I can deliver the same value sitting on this particular desk in Mumbai, because the whole world comes to you. It's a very different phenomenon. So what would you do if you were an airline company that had acquired another airline? What would you have to do to the value that you paid for the brand? Very critical question. The whole business model has pivoted and got disrupted to such a big extent. Make everything digital, make everything soft. These are the kind of things that will drive a whole lot of churn in value, and value will keep migrating.
Siddharth, do you have a supplementary, or
Yeah.
I have? Yeah, go ahead.
I have. Because, sir, you spoke about in the context of mergers and acquisition. What would be the situation? How would somebody look at a deliberation when the brand is internally generated?
Organic.
Is organic.
Organic region.
Yes.
Very good question. Very, very good question. So large businesses were set up based on the explicit recognition of an internally generated brand. How was it done? How was it? You can't set up on the books by passing an entry, asset, brand, and liability reserves. That's not permitted by any accounting standard. But if you have a independently verifiable value of the brand, and the company in which this internally generated brand has been created is, let us say, merged with another company, then in the ratio, exchange ratio that is set on this amalgamation, the value of the brand would get picked up. So that in the new entity, that would become an explicit, just as I described to you in the case of the pharma company. We did 2 acquisitions, so we had 40% intangibles, and now we are tracking it for impairment every year. We'll, of course, write it off over the period that we have decided from an accounting standard point of view. But every year we have to test it based on the value at which we set it up minus the depreciation that we written off. So it becomes critical to do this exercise in a robust, sustainable, independent, objective, verifiable manner. And that's where you come in.
Thank you. Siddharth.
Yeah. So again, in the same context, since we are speaking about mergers and acquisition, from a governance point of view, when mergers and acquisition is happening, investment committees are today aware of the immense value that lies.
Hold on.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think somebody needs to go on mute. The value that lies when they're paying in a brand and the intellectual property when they're making a acquisition and merging with each other. While there are very well laid out processes for doing due diligence around tangibles, what are the processes that a board from a
Sorry
governance?
to interrupt, Mr. Haribhakti. There is a sound coming from your end. There's a background.
In my?
Yes, please. Yeah, now it's perfect. Thank you, sir. Sorry for. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So like I was saying, what investment committees today are aware of the large amounts that they're paying for brands and intellectual properties. One of the largest mergers and acquisition that happened in the recent past was British American Tobacco buying out American Reynolds, where 90% of the value was paid for the brands in a $100 billion deal value. So while there are processes, practices laid out for doing due diligence around tangible assets, how, from a governance point of view, would intangible assets due diligence be done also?
You need to unmute, sir.
Sir, you need to unmute.
So again, the diligence needs to be done in a very objective manner.
Right.
Because it's not as if the premium that you pay for this brand is going to just sit there. You're going to be obligated under the accounting standards and the reporting standards to amortize the money that you paid for the brands. So there are two ways in which companies have done it in the past. One is that if you have other assets and other claims which need to be revalued at the time that you are taking this decision to buy the brands, then you reallocate the value, the consideration that you have actually paid, so that you don't set up a huge amount as brand premium. And there are two components of it. One is the long-term brand premium that you pay, which can be written off over a longer period of time. And then there are those short-term efficiencies that are delivered by the acquisition, which you kind of write off over a faster period of time. But every year, because you are obligated to, one, write off, and two, test for impairment, you need to make sure that the diligence with which you set up and pay for it is such that your business model, which will emerge from that acquisition, will be able to afford these cash and non-cash costs. And that is the seriousness with which you have to actually make sure that you don't overpay for brands. And let's assume you do. Then you need to do phenomenal amount of work on the business model to make sure that the business model pivots to make your brand acquisition cost affordable. And that is the challenge that many companies are facing today, where they have paid a phenomenal amount for the brand. And now they realize that they can't carry on with a model which will generate that 30% EBITDA, which was the assumption underlying the acquisition. So if that 30 goes to 20, then you'll have a huge write-down, instantaneous write-down, which can be sometimes unaffordable.
Yeah, there's a slightly different angle I would like to add here, sir. See, when you're talking about 90% of the value lying in the brand, and that's the assumption that the investment committee is going to take on board to buy or not to buy. Like you were talking about a little earlier about the research you were doing to understand premium. How does the investment committee satisfy itself that the forecasts that are being made, the future cash flow forecasts that are being made, being assigned 90% of the brand is actually true or not? That's what I think the DDR
Great
question was about.
Ramesh Bhai. I think the dependence is on global research. Again, that's where organizations like yours come in. We need to know what happened in every transaction of a similar time, anywhere in the world. And we need to know that in a collated manner instantaneously. The minute a data room is set up to actually value a particular brand and an acquisition, you need to bring all this data to bear on what were the underlying assumptions. What is the global market movement? What is the market share? Can that market share increase? Are there internal capabilities which will enhance the market share?
Right.
So we ask all of these questions in the committee, the M&A committee, on which I have served many times, to actually challenge the assumptions that organizations like yours make in building the model, which gives us the final result that, all right, you can go up to this much. Then, of course, it's a matter of judgment and how much the CEO is pushing and, all of that.
Thank you. So that,
Every assumption needs to be questioned. And I test it every year.
Right.
When I sit on a board, it's not as if I finish doing it on the day that we do the acquisition. Through the entire life of the write down, we are first committed to making sure that it is right.
makes sense. Totally.
Perfect. So you have spent time with the IASB, which is a body which comes out with the International Financial Reporting Standards. And they have been fighting for a long time for the recognition of intangibles in the books of accounts. So keeping in mind what the IFRS is doing and what the Indian accounting standards, which are right now in line with the IFRS, what do you think we should be doing to get better recognition of the intangible assets? And how do we therefore remove the information asymmetry that exists today from the point of view of tangibles versus intangibles?
Great question. I have been, there's only one thing in the accounting world where the whole world came to accept that only one standard should prevail, which is simply the movement away from historical cost to fair value, which is the underlying principle of international accounting standards. I was ambassadoring the total adoption of IASB in India. Total. No questions. We have a participation role in the standard setting body. We should have a participation role in the advisory council. We should have a participatory role in every forum which sets the standard. But then to say that, we are India and we are different and we need, Bangladesh works exactly on IAS. Sri Lanka works 100% on IAS. China, one day, the vice chairman of the organization or department which sort of is responsible for accounting standards, woke up and said, China will now adopt. And that's it. The countries that are resisting, strangely, will at some point, so every time we do a statement of accounts, and if you want to raise money in international markets, we need to redo our accounts. That's the information asymmetry you're talking about. I need to retranslate. So accounts which are made in Indian GAAP have to be retranslated to IASB. If I want to raise money in European markets, or I want to raise money even in Hong Kong, or if I want to raise money in New York, God forbid, then I have to do translation into American FASB standards, into international standards. Fortunately, now they have accepted that FASB and international accounting standards both would work in a capital market outing. But this is one area where the world will have to come together at some point and say that no more information asymmetry. No more do we permit countries in one part of the world to do accounting differently from another. And I've been publicly against any deviations or any carve-outs, and leave alone multiple carve-outs. Multiple carve-outs just simply challenge the utility and the value of comparability. And today, everything is global. When you buy an organization, you don't know what part of its supply chain will be in some other geography and what would be the accounting in that geography. And that is why you need it. This is the challenge that we must all publicly advocate. But the good news is that outside the formal reporting system, which is still based largely on historical cost, there's a bit of fair valuation which goes in. But we have now the integrated reporting standards and the integrated report available. Leading companies, particularly where I'm sitting on the board, I evangelize and I like to make sure that they all start following integrated reporting and report on 6 capitals. Because that is what gives the reader a view into the future of the company.
Correct.
As opposed to understanding the past.
The past.
And that is why it is so important to have integrated report, which will give you 6 capitals, reporting on 6 capitals. That's what will make you as a reader of that financial statement appreciate why the future will be different and better.
Thank you.
Since you brought up the point of reporting happening outside the formal statements of accounts, one of the things that we have observed is firms like Singapore Airlines, HSBC, and even closer to Infosys used to talk about the value of their brand in their annual reports because they felt that it was an asset that shareholders needs to be cognizant about. So is that a concept which needs evangelization in India? And how do you think we can go about it? Do you think there needs to be a change in disclosure policy where shareholders and the rest of the stakeholders at large are made cognizant about the value of the brand and what the role it is playing in the business?
I'm a great votary for making sure that brands are put on, the value is disclosed. I mean, whether you put it in your balance sheet or you disclose it in your financial statements or in your integrated report, where it appears is less important. The important fact is that it should be disclosed and it should be understood by the readers in the right context. And therefore, I feel that the evangelization happens because the market wants it. You know, Infosys at one time used to publish its annual report in 20 gaps.
Yes.
So they had a Japanese gap, and they had a European gap, and they had an IFRS, and they had a FASB, everything. So depending on who was reading it and what system or grammar of accounting they understood, they had it right there. So that's the way that will happen. Because as you want to raise money, large chunks of money internationally, you'll have to report in the international methods. That's what.
Yeah, but so the question is that why is it that such few firms even today are willing to, have a methodology, whatever methodology, by which they are publicly disclosing the brand in their financial statements, especially the listed ones?
Most of them have not done enough work to build, protect, and maintain their brands. Think about it. I mean, you can count the brands that you can recall and order on the tips of your fingers. That is the challenge. People have not really realized how critical it is to actually be recognized because of the brand you have. That is the part of education that you will have to do.
I was going to ask you that, but you put it back on us. I'm saying from your vantage point, do you think there are ways of evangelizing this to get at least the big companies, the better ones who have strong brands, to declare it in their books of accounts and in their financial statements at least? So
I'll give you a few data points. A few years ago, nobody had an integrated report. Integrated reporting came into the world. It emerged as a recognized 6 capital formula. It emerged maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago. The rate of adoption was extremely slow. And then suddenly, as World Bank and IFC and all the global financial institutions started saying that unless your ESG compliance is in place, we won't give you a single dollar, everybody changed. So a lot will depend on the force that is applied by financial institutions, global organizations, and people like that who need to make sure that they will not provide the resources if you are not compliant with ESG. And that is going to be the thing that will make the difference that you are talking about. no amount of evangelizing helps. I think unless there is a
Strong disincentive not to.
yeah, or there is a lack of being able to obtain money altogether,
Correct.
which can, simply stall your business. That's what gets you going.
Siddharth?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. So, sir, since the concept of valuing brands intangibles is still an esoteric concept for most people, and accountants have struggled with valuing intangibles, is there a need today to connect operational metrics to the brand, to intangibles, like you spoke about? Can we connect, say, operational metrics like revenue, like profits, to something like purpose?
Absolutely, and critically so. So when you start your next study of brand valuation, I think these are the ideas that you will have to put in the documentation, in the research that is going to support that value.
Right.
An organization which has a well-defined purpose and has a brand that is actually delivering its promise will have a far greater multiple, even in the same industry. So this is the big challenge of valuation now. You can't simply keep comparing two companies in the same industry and expect them to have exactly the same outcomes, because everyone organizes themselves uniquely. Their connect with the ecosystem is so unique that you need to find out what is it that is unique, what is distinguishable, what is incremental, what is the delta, and is that delta sustainable? And if so, over what period of time?
Right.
Because business models are today unraveling at a very rapid pace. So earlier you could have a period over which the growth that you're estimating will stay, say 5 years. That suddenly, in some circumstances, you may raise to 10 years if the brand has a fabulous pull. But in many other instances, you may have to bring it down from 5 years to 3 years because the brand can equally unravel.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
So when we say, for example, a good example which I generally use is the Disney brand. So wherever you go, the only brand for which you will not get a discount from the tour operator is Disney, right? And we know the value is great. Now, how do you think it's important to wire up the fact that you don't get a discount to the fact that they've got tremendous value? Otherwise, value sits as a very notional concept in people's minds. Walt Disney is a very valuable brand. But the fact of the matter is the value is coming to the shareholder because of metrics like this. Universal Studio will give you at $68. Walt Disney will never give you below $80. You can do whatever you want. And people are paying for it.
Very, very critical point you brought up. I think if you can, what is price? To my mind, pricing power is the biggest distinguishing factor in brand value. Biggest. And what is that a factor of? Your confidence. Your confidence in what? In your business model, in your resources, in the entire endowment that you have, in your 6 capitals. Are you able to identify how deeply and strongly you are endowed in order to make sure that you can prove that you have this ability to price without a discount? You see, in the same cement industry, there will be companies which are at 30+% EBITDA margin, and there will be fellows who are at 7 and 8%. What is the distinguishing factor? It's just that hard, grinding, selfless work to make sure that your distribution is right, your costs are low, you're delivering the right quality. Nobody ever complains about that. You're not filling wrong quantities. You're not doing any of those things. And then that becomes a natural, repeatable, deliverable value. So it's now becoming highly individualized.
Thank you, sir. Siddharth.
So today there are one of the things that we see that there are a lot of these brand valuation league tables being published, where people look at brand value, but especially the top three, the three big ones which are published, and there seems to be confusion between them as regards to the value between each of the brands that they are talking about. So Apple will have different values in each of these league tables. So does this muddy the water from a governance point of view? From a governance impact point of view? Does it take us 10 years back?
Actually not.
Okay.
I think it is important to look at sustainability of the brand value. And that is why it's important to test it every so often. I would test, in any case, we do impairment testing every year. So therefore, that's a nice, good cycle that you can adopt to make sure that you are retesting the efficacy, the value, the sustainability of the brand. And that is also a matter of governance. So when you link governance with brand value, you need to have very robust processes to make sure that the brand is sustained. And if it is clear that it is not sustaining over a long period of time, then you need to examine whether the underlying business model has pivoted, or there are external circumstances which are causing disruption, which is taking away or destroying the value. And if that is the case, then you need to do the impairment swiftly.
Right.
So governance and valuation and all of these concepts are very intricately linked to each other. And if both don't support each other, the trust, ultimately, what is it? It is my word against yours. And if your word can prevail, and can prevail over sustained periods of time under varying circumstances, then that's your brand value.
I have a last question which I want to put to Mr. Hari Bhakti. May I do that,
Sure.
Siddharth? Today morning's papers spoke about how the Supreme Court filing, which the Tata Sons have done, spoke about how between 2017 and 2018, the Tata brand lost more than $1 billion of value due to the change in the chairmanship and the new watch. Now, 10 years ago, this would have said, oh, it's some big concept that's the Tata they're talking about for their own defense purposes. Today, from your vantage point, do you believe that this article would have been taken seriously by many boards and they would want to know more and why and how?
I have to say yes. I have to say that an event that is so well discussed at the highest forum in the country and about one of the most respected brands in our country will deserve full penetrating attention and full penetrating discussion. So, is it that there's been too much of a diffusion of the brand? Is it that the acquisitions that cost more than the actual EBITDA delivered, incremental EBITDA delivered could afford, led to this diminishing value? Is it that the most powerful and most profitable company in the stable works under the name as a brand, as opposed to a distinct brand which has been developed and evolved? So there are all these questions that will come up and get debated in forums such as this until we really zero in on what you back and forth to make sure you have the brand, the value having enhanced or diminished, gets trustworthy answers. Because ultimately it's trust. Ultimately it is about how many years can you keep delivering that superior value? Discounted present value of that is your brand. Your reputation is based on how many years you have kept your promise and how many years will people keep paying you that premium price because they expect that you will keep your promise. At the bottom, that is what it is.
Exactly. More questions from anybody else, Siddharth?
There are more questions, so let me start with asking one which has come to us from Singapore. From the point of view of startups, right? How can startups differentiate their enterprise value by focusing on brand management, and how can they be mentored to look at brand management as a strategic practice, and not only in spite of the razor-sharp focus that they have on the products that they typically tend to have?
Very good question, because unless you start thinking about building your brand value from day one, you will lose it. I often say that data sets, if they are not captured, can never be got back. You can't go back in history and figure out what was the digital exhaust that led to a particular transaction happening in a particular way. You can't go back. You got to track it as it happens. And you got to give it the attention it deserves from day one. So, keeping your promises, being fair to people, being honest in intent, making sure that all the economic, you pay your taxes on time, you're 100% compliant. All of this adds that small value every time incrementally to your brand value. And you may be a startup today, but 2 years down the road when you're doing your first round, or 5 years down the road when you're doing your final round, before you do escape velocity, you will need to bring all of this together in a way that your brand will fetch you the fair price, which investors will feel happy about paying. Because on that value, they will in turn keep making the returns. So think of sustainability, think of purpose, think of that continuous ability to do the right thing, because it's the only thing that will make you valuable.
So you're saying put the process and the proof from day one.
Completely, from day one. And that's why you cannot say that we'll start doing governance 2 years down the road. It is important to start doing good governance on day one.
On day one, yes.
Right, sir. So we have one more question, which comes from the people who are participating. So people have other question is around what happened with the Kingfisher and a Jet who had significant brand equity, but they failed as companies. So what is the relationship between the brand equity that they had and the governance practices that led to the collapse for them?
Superb question. Yeah.
Excellent question. Very, very, very important to answer, and answer it straight. I will say 3 things about that whole episode. One is that the collapse in the model was very rapid. The pricing power, the cost equation, and everything changed dramatically. And therefore, it became almost impossible for them to sustain as a going concern. And therefore, they needed something outside the asset and liability, the common reckoning, to make sure that they could finance their way out to the next challenge. And that is why the bird was valued by somebody, whatever, and was placed on the brand, on the Kingfisher brand. Brand did not keep its promise. It could not fly. It could not keep giving the extraordinary service that it was meant to give. And so when the brand promise vanished, the value of that brand vanished. And what got left behind is liabilities, which are now being challenged and sought to be recovered in international courts. So it's important to recognize the destruction of the model. It's important to recognize the need to finance and get over the hump. It's important to make sure that the leadership takes the right calls at the right time. and makes their disclosures in a way that will give them a chance to actually come back another day to fight another battle, which he did not do. And that is why we see the problems in that situation today.
Got it. Thank you. So one other question that has come is, what makes for great governance today, and what can boards do to strive to achieve it?
Keep asking the right questions. There are only 3 capitals that you walk into a boardroom with. Most important is your moral capital. Second important is your preparation capital. You got to be prepared. At the board meeting, you should have read every paper. You should know the agenda backward. Should be so. That's your capital. Your intensive work capital. And third is your innovation capital. If you cannot be innovative, if you can't talk about what needs to be done under any situation that emerges, COVID. I mean, we are dealing with a completely unknown event. It just suddenly came. There are some companies which kind of got destroyed and had to find another suitor to carry them forward. But others are doing phenomenally well. The cement companies that this is public information, so I can share it, had the best EBITDA performance in history in June of 2020. Now, that is what the innovation, the moral, and the preparation capital delivers. And so remember that you need to walk into a room, if you're in a boardroom, with these 3 capitals.
Right. One other question that has come is, where we have seen situations where tangible assets are being insured and protected. How far are we from ensuring our intangible assets? And
You can't insure them.
Okay.
You can't insure them. You just have to preserve them. You just have to work hard at making sure they are preserved. Nobody will create a pool which will, because it's so uncertain, because it depends on every action every day that somebody takes, which drives the value of a brand up or down. And so it's impossible to model that unless you have a continuous input model which tells you what's happening to every variable. How will you prepare the pool? Because you will be asked to do that, right?
Yeah. Got it, sir. One other question has come from is related to what happened with Franklin Templeton, where they closed down their 6 debt schemes because of COVID. And people feel that there was a failure on the part of the trustees. So what kind of governance could they have done to protect the investor in these kind of situations?
Well, I must say that I have very high respect for Franklin Templeton as a fund house. So everything I say should be sort of viewed in the context of that natural bias that I have, because I developed that respect over years and years of watching them. I think it was not recognized enough that the risk had shifted from the equity markets to the debt markets. And the debt markets were getting extremely toxic because there were some very large failures of NBFCs. There were large failures of many businesses. And there were sudden failures. So suddenly from a AAA, people went to D.
Right.
Now, and when that happens in multiple situations, then the toxicity of the risk in a particular asset class just astronomically goes up. I'm not using that as a defense, but I'm saying that this was the fact. I would certainly lay a portion of the blame on the managers, the governors, and whoever else was there to make sure that they should have anticipated it. They should have
seen what could have been done to mitigate it. But at least what they did was that when they found that it had gone beyond a certain degree of tolerance, they decided to explore solutions. Now, it's a different issue that the solution that they put on the table first was not acceptable. So they'll have to go back to the drawing board and find another solution. But I feel these are instances which tell you why you need that governance mechanism all the while active, why you need 3 capitals, why you need those 3 underlying philosophies, why you need this whole infrastructure of governance and brand and sustainability to make sure that you don't meet a reputational, potentially reputation damaging situation like they did.
All right, sir. Thank you so much for that, sir. I think we have got all the questions we have right now. RJT, Group Captain, any further questions you would like to ask?
I think you're through with most of them, because some of them are more investment oriented. I think nothing to do with talk. I think you have covered almost anything. Anybody else? Ravi would like to ask any question before we close? Anybody else? Or Jude, Ramesh?
RJT?
I'm done.
Yes.
I don't have any questions.
Okay.
Okay.
That's fine. Now over to you. Anything else?
Maybe we can ask the president to sum up.
Yes.
Closing remarks from the president.
You would like to do that? Closing remarks?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I think it was a very absorbing session. For me, it was phenomenal learning. I think I captured quite a bit, especially, the kind of concepts that I've learned today is quite phenomenal. And I think from a valuation of brand, I think there's a lot more that our country has to evolve. Is clearly there. I think this whole simplicity around purpose, sustainability, and selfless service. I think if companies can epitomize it, I think they really would do great. Because surviving in in an ecosystem which is continuously changing is also is where the acid test for all companies and brands come about actually. So I think if this is articulated very well, I think the purpose, sustainability, and selfless service, I think was beautifully curated by Mr. Sailesh. I think that was phenomenal, and I think that still rings and resonates very well in my takeaways this evening. From my side, I think it was huge learning for me. Actually, I'm not into valuation business, but I get so much knowledge this evening, and I'm sure those of the participants who have been on the platform would have immensely benefited. And I think the fireside chat was also very absorbing and very thought-provoking questions that came about. So we were really very happy you could spend a lot of time this evening with us and share all your wisdom and knowledge that would really benefit a lot of the members this evening. And thank you very much, Mr. Sailesh, and also Mr. Ramesh. You are really in a business where there's a lot of potential. I could see you need to, you probably only covered the tip of the iceberg, and there's a lot underneath below the iceberg, which probably needs to be unearthed. And, the opportunities clearly there is a lot more that companies can really transform their true value or the hidden value or the intrinsic value that probably you have a great opportunity, in my view, as an enterprise. And I think thank you very much for sharing and it's immense knowledge that you brought this evening to us. I don't think we would get it from anyone except Mr. Sailesh. So thank you very much, and
Very
thank
kind
you
of
very
you.
much.
Thank
and,
you so much, Ravi.
yeah.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you very much.
And I think Ramesh,
Truly obliged.
thanks to your team for curating some wonderful questions as well. And
Siddharth.
we really appreciate Siddharth. Thank you very much from your side. You put in a lot of effort, and there were fantastic questions that you could curate this evening. And a big thank you to Team MMA. For keeping the technology live and working and kicking. It's not easy, I know that.
It's not easy.
But a big remarkable thank you to all the MMA team actually. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Group Captain.
Thank you. Thank you, Ravi. It's unscheduled concluding remarks. COVID times, I think it all happens. So thank you so much. And thanks to each one of you, especially Napina. She's not there. She's the one who has been coordinating very closely with us and putting this thing together, because we have got another few more to do that. And thanks so much. And thank you, viewers. We have more than 1,600 viewers watch program live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and also live on radio. And each one of them, really, the takeaway would have been, as Mr. Ravi said, it have been fantastic evening for them with the time well spent. And Mr. Shailya Albekti, is always fascinating to hear you every time. And we get so much of wisdom from you. Thanks so much for joining. Thanks, Siddharth, and thanks to everyone. And thanks, RJT. Lovely, having you with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.